Mayor.
Yes,
Oh, is our theme song still going?
it just ended. How's
Okay.
it going, pagan communist?
Oh, it's going pretty good. Rubber fingers. We actually got rain, which since we're in a drought,
Mm-hmm.
like the most harsh drought since they've been keeping track of droughts
Oh yeah.
in New Mexico. Yes.
Wow.
That's why our senator said, what was the point of a climate bill if it didn't have anything to help the climate?
Or an infrastructure bill.
Yeah, but also, yeah, that one. Yes,
Right.
the infrastructure bill to help the climate. But
That was supposed to be a climate infrastructure.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
because we are, as you know, in a dire, we're in dire situations. I mean, when you just look at the amount of extinction, we're going to be able to kill off the dinosaurs. Wow, the mammals actually will kick the dinosaurs' ass.
Well, you mean the remaining dinosaurs like crocodiles and birds and stuff? Or what do you mean? Uh-oh, did I lose you? Are you there?
Uh, yes.
Oh, there you are. Okay. You cut out for a second.
Sorry, I don't know what to tell you. I mean,
Yeah,
you
well,
get pissed off to your internet service or they'll fuck with you.
yeah. Can you
Although
believe it? This is our 16th episode. So
I
that
know that's
means,
like 4 months.
yep,
No, 5 months.
now four.
Yeah, four.
Mm-hmm.
16? No.
Yep.
Yeah, four times four.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. That's amazing for us. Hello. Hello to our audience who may or may not be listening live.
Yeah.
We hope that you're doing okay, although I know much of the weather around the country is in very bad shape.
Mm-hmm.
Like Washington and Oregon, they're having almost their record highs. Is it
Just doing a
me?
little, just doing a little sound check, making sure everything is
Okay.
firing on all cylinders.
And
Yeah.
then, of course, the other part, the part to the, okay, so the country to the west of us is having an extreme drought, and the country to the east of us, that this would be the United States. When I say country, I just mean the land beyond me, right? Because we're all in the same country. So the country beyond me is flooding.
What do you mean? Where is that?
Texas. Texas
Oh,
is flooding.
Texas is flooding right
Texas
now?
and
Really?
Louis, Texas and Louisiana are flooding. This is where we're sort of getting the rain from, the tropical storm that's coming up, the things that are hitting Mexico and stuff. That's why we're getting rain and not the West.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, supposedly the West Coast, where I am, is about to hit a crazy heat wave, right?
Yes. Although you're not seeing record heat. Vegas saw record heat.
Ah.
Las Vegas. I read an article.
Mm.
So the valets in Las Vegas, right,
Mm-hmm.
at the casinos,
Mm-hmm.
they have literally passed out when they've gone to get a car
Mm.
inside the car because the car can be as much as 140 degrees.
Horrible. Yeah. No, thank you. It's beautiful here. It's gorgeous. It's been like, you know, maybe 80
43%.
at the hottest. Like, yeah, but it's been beautiful. Today, I guess today is like
Yeah,
high of 80.
yeah, actually, our high today is only supposed to be 75
Mm-hmm.
because it's all cloudy and rain. But so just kind of on those notes about the weather and the
Yeah.
Midwest got they got like they've had a drought, and then they got a lot of rain, so they've had flooding.
Mm-hmm.
So the beef, the animals that people like to eat, not you,
Mm-hmm.
Rubberfingers, you are a vegan.
Mm-hmm.
They're, they're either scorching to death or they're drowning.
I know.
So you,
It's
it's not so
terrible.
good for them either. It is. It is. It's pretty awful. It's pretty awful. But yeah, since the birds are supposed to be the remnants of the dinosaurs,
Mm-hmm.
and America is managing to kill off 2/3 of its wild birds, that's predicted on, that
Mm-hmm.
very political channel, the Weather Channel.
Wow, 2/3. It's
2/3.
tragic.
Yeah, those are the dinosaurs, right?
Yeah.
So we are managing to kill off, the mammals will kill
To
off the dinosaurs.
finish them off for once and for all. Um,
Yeehaw.
yeah. I mean, now you could. I think the climate is something you could address with an amendment. It wouldn't be necessarily like the best or certainly not the easiest route. I mean, regular legislation is always going to be easier than a an amendment, but I think you could easily get if all this if well, I guess it would take 3/4 of the states obviously to ratify an amendment, but that means if if 3/4 of the states agreed to something like a carbon cap or something like that, you could enshrine it in the Constitution. Absolutely, say uh,
Yeah.
no more than uh, whatever, like twice the amount of energy can be, fossil fuels or carbon emitting. Like at least 50% of your energy infrastructure has to be renewables or something like that. I mean, you could write that into an amendment. I don't.
You
Yeah.
could.
Yeah.
Our biggest problem in America is we're still like the only one of the only countries in the entire world that is still deciding if there's climate change.
Mm-hmm.
We still have an argument among regular people in this country. I mean, that's how well that the corporations have managed to kill us off. So
Mm-hmm.
when the corporations extinct us, I hope all you capitalists are happy, because that's what happens when you let everything run to its ultimate end. It's
Mm-hmm.
usually not good. It's not. It tends to be destructive. I don't mean to sound mean or a pessimist or anything like that, but
Yeah.
that's how it kind of runs. I mean, historically speaking. And that's, like I was watching a documentary on Britain. I know we need to read the fifth of
Yeah. We'll get there
Article 5,
eventually. We don't have to do it
but
right away.
but but it's about empire, and it's about Britain's
Mm-hmm.
empire, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Britain was not the first. They were not really even the ones that maybe got the wealthiest. The Spanish did very well. The Portuguese did amazingly well. We don't talk about them. We
Mm-hmm.
talk about Britain, I think, because of the language, English, which
Right.
managed to spread around the world a form of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have American English, which to me is completely different than Indian English in India. Like if you go to talk to people in India, they will
Mm.
understand you, but it's not
Right.
even
We lost you a little bit. It's different. It's not the same. I know what you mean. Yeah, that's the thing about colonialism. You know, it it's kind of like a virus. Language is the symptom, I guess. Uh, yeah, colonialism is bad. And
did I lose you?
oh, there you are. You're back. Okay, lost you for a second.
I don't know. It's really bad today.
Mm.
Let me just a second. Let me go. I think it's I think the modem is just No, it's okay. It's on. It should not be a problem because I'm not that close to the modem and I'm not near the computer today, which is
Mm.
really weird. Because usually we have all that trouble when I'm right next to the computer
Um,
with dropping, you know,
yeah. But anyways, you were
because
saying
it is
India is has close but not quite the same
the
language.
same. Or I was just saying about empire,
Right. Hmm.
about that what happened is like in Britain basically they used all their resources and they went looking for more.
Hmm.
That's how capitalism is.
Hmm.
That is by its very definition supposedly what capitalism has to do.
Right.
Capitalism is not about recycling, reusing, sustainability.
Hmm.
That does not seem to be what, because then how would you continue to make money if you kept using a
Yep.
lot of the old same things?
It's about
Which brings
making
me
money
on to
by any means necessary, including the biggest, what I would say is probably the biggest problem in this country and around the world, I guess, but definitely in America, is just the uh, propaganda, or really it's disingenuous arguments from people like fossil fuel companies, same as the cigarette companies when they were saying that their products weren't killing people. They knew it was, but they were arguing in bad faith, just like the fossil fuel companies are, just like the entire right wing is now. They're just arguing in bad faith about things that they, claiming things they don't really believe. Same with I mean, people who oppose Article 5, I would say a good portion of them are doing it in bad faith. Not all of them. I'm sure there are plenty who really believe they're actually, afraid of, something bad happening, but I think most of them know that they're just towing the line that their job requires them to tow, and they don't really care one way or another. They're just arguing because it's their job. That's my that's my belief. I don't have any evidence for that, and people are welcome to uh, try and
argue
argue.
that with us.
Yeah, say that, and again, I'm not saying
Give us
everybody is so.
evidence. Give us evidence. I mean,
Hmm.
we're willing to look at the evidence.
Yeah, yeah. By all means, convince me that Article 5 is bad so that we can stop doing this show, and that'll save me, a ton of work, and it'll save me a lot of I mean, obviously I would still want to do a different show with you, Pagan Communist, because I enjoy it immensely, but um we could just be shooting the shit about whatever, but we feel we have an obligation, or to do something positive for the world, because obviously things are not going well, in my opinion. That's obvious. And yeah, amendments would be the thing that would pull our chestnuts out of the fire. Uh-oh, did we lose you again?
Are you,
Oh, there you are. You are cutting out a little bit.
because my modem keeps rebooting itself.
I wonder, could you just go turn off your Wi-Fi and just use your cell phone signal?
Except I can't seem to get a Wi-Fi for my. I can't seem to get internet for the cell phone unless it's off of my home Wi-Fi. Sometimes I can, but I can't find it. Like when I go looking for it in my Wi-Fi or to get a connection, I can't get it. I tell you, okay. This is when you realize that American corporations are just the scum of the earth. The scum. The scum. Just they're unbelievably awful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's because like, okay, guys, like, all right, my cell phone service isn't working right. I've been fighting with them for 6 months. Then I had my internet problem, as you can now see, and I've been fighting with them, and they totally screwed up. I had devices I didn't
Yeah, you cut out again. You cut out again. Well, Yeah, corporations. I think you may need
Oh, we're
to.
in green again.
Oh, there you are.
Am I back?
Now you're back.
Okay, I'm back.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. No, that's part of it. I've never been able to get like and when I've called customer service on my cell phone about how to get internet, not from home and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
they're like, we can't help you. I'm
Yikes.
like, okay, yeah, good, good.
Um,
Yeah.
I want to go back to the article uh, that I read by that guy Rob Nadelson. I just found it again. This was on May 3rd, 2021. It's on termlimits.com. So again, he's kind of arguing for the Convention of States people, but um,
Is this the constitutional
this is
scholar
the
or
yeah,
constitutional?
this is the constitutional scholar. Um, I just keep thinking about this quote that he used at the end. It's just such a knockout argument. Uh, he says, He basically is saying, imagine um, that the door, like, say we were, Congress or people were arguing about how bad our country has gotten, and then suppose, contrary to all expectations, the door were open in the back and in strode James Madison and John Dickerson. And after we all gasped and wondered how they got here, we all mobbed around to talk to them. And several of us started complaining to them about what the federal government had become, that it had become a government that has snapped the scope of its powers a long time ago, that it had become a government that has burdened us with incredible debt, that had become a government that was oppressive and couldn't even balance its own budget. I mean, he's on and on about the budget, which I don't think is the biggest problem, but I'd say it's, although I mean, really, the budget is the problem when you think about the military budget. I don't know if that's what he's thinking of, but yeah, that is the biggest portion of our budget, and it's a huge problem. Um, can't even balance its own budget. And when we outlined all those problems, Mr. Dickerson and Mr. Madison what would be their response? Their response would
Okay,
be,
I don't know what's going on.
"Oh no, I still hear you. Uh-oh, can you not hear me, pagan communist?" Anyways, let me keep reading. Mr. Dickerson and Mr. Madison, their response would be, "Well, have you used the procedure in Article 5 that we wrote into the Constitution for exactly that eventuality?" And when we sheepishly admitted that no, we hadn't, we'd allowed ourselves to be distracted by alarmists and quacks, and we'd never really done it, no doubt they would look at us and say that the situation is our own fault, and they would be right. Yeah, and that is, again, Rob Nadelson, a constitutional scholar.
I'm gonna lose you again. Are you there?
Yep, I'm here. I hear you.
Okay, sorry, sorry, sorry. I'm so sorry today. I didn't know what to tell you all about. But this is corporate America. Obviously, my you know I have no control over my internet. My ISP as far as giving me decent service. So see, they don't have to kick you off of YouTube. They don't have to kick you off of Twitch. All they got to do is just crap your internet service,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can't even go on any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So love your freedom, Americans. Love your freedom.
I mean, uh, we already lost. That's another good thing that could be done for an amendment, an internet bill of rights, because we already, in theory, we've already lost the internet because of what's his name, Ajit Pai, and under the Trump administration. I mean, yeah, Obama appointed Ajit Pai, but then under the Trump administration, they killed net neutrality. So at this point, there's nothing stopping those ISPs from throttling websites that they don't approve of, Um, and I think an amendment would absolutely make sense for that. An internet bill of rights, no, net neutrality should be enshrined in the Constitution. I absolutely believe that. Um,
Well, and
mhm.
the other thing being that everyone is entitled to decent internet service at a reasonable rate. I mean, The one that I have, we were just talking about. If you want to buy a
Mm-hmm.
modem, it's $200. Okay, that's one thing to buy a modem for $200. How long's the warranty?
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean,
that
yeah, that's actually another thing
that's
that.
really the thing. Like, think about that though. If it's only 60 days, it's 90 days, it maybe it's a year.
Mm-hmm.
$200. Okay, a year, that's a lot of money in 200 years. I mean, $200. That's about what it costs to rent it, right? So that's why they want you to rent it and rent it forever
Right.
because they've worked it out so that basically if it defuncts itself in a year, you're fucked because then you
Mm-hmm.
got to buy another one.
Right.
So, and that's a lot of upfront costs for a lot of people. I mean, that
And
could be.
we had said a couple weeks back about nationalizing industries. I would say that's absolutely an industry that would make sense to nationalize the internet ISPs. Like those.
But in,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead. I was just going to say, but instead of doing anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
they are consolidating more because we were just talking about how CenturyLink became part of Lumine
Mm-hmm.
Technologies, which we don't even know, which may not even be an American company.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know if that's an American company?
I don't.
No, we don't. We don't even know. We should know those sort of things as Americans. That should really be what the news is about. But instead, they want the news to be about, you know, about how, oh, I don't know.
How critical race theory is
There we go.
Maoist Marxist thing, or how
Oh, right. Or how
uh,
communism is bad and
yeah,
socialism is bad, and anybody who's a communist is really, a horrible, no good, very bad, terrible person. So, and on communism, I want to bring up Cuba,
oh sure, mm-hmm.
Cuba, because the rest of the world is now in love with Cuba. Fidel Castro, you have got your revenge. You may be dead, but it still came. And for me, it's sweet. Okay? He said, "One day America, the rest of the world will hate you and like us."
Mm-hmm.
He said that.
Mm-hmm.
Not exactly like that, but he said that. One day they will see you for who you are.
Well,
And that day has come. The chickens have come home to roost. It's a day of reckoning. Why? Because Cuba, the
mm-hmm.
little, terrible, horrible, no good, very bad communist country, as big America thinks, right?
Mm-hmm.
As we're taught in big America to think
Mm-hmm.
about Cuba, has made their own vaccine. So, all you white supremacists, you, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't. You don't know anything. You are not superior.
Mm-hmm.
America isn't even superior. When a little, what you've tried to make a shithole country for the last 60 years
Mm-hmm.
has just outflanked fucked you
Mm-hmm.
because they can give that vaccine to anybody in the fucking world. And guess what America can't do? We can't stop them
Mm-hmm.
unless we nuke them. We can't stop them unless we nuke them. So are we going to do that? Are we going to nuke somebody who just wants to be nice because we've become so mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's
So
like
there. Do you think
it,
I can move to Cuba? I've decided I think I want to move to Cuba.
I
I'm serious.
I'd like to visit Cuba. I don't know if I'd want to move there, but
Well, I think for me it'd probably just went in the same. I'd probably go for a visit and then
just wind up staying.
no.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I
It's
mean, I think
funny.
in a way I've been. Go ahead.
I think it's funny how all those um, xenophobic, jingoistic, you know, nationalists who voted for Trump really just handed a gift to the all the I'm not going to call them enemies of America, but what would you call them? Like adversaries, you know? Trump was the biggest gift to all of our competitors like Cuba, Russia, China, because he just made us look so terrible on the world stage. He was such an embarrassment. It just dropped our
Reputation,
reputation. Our credibility is
our
shot.
status.
Yeah, because he's such a clown and he made us into this circus that and yeah, and he helped. Yeah, everything he did when the pandemic hit, which is all, again, like we've said before, the pandemic, God works in plagues. If you are a Christian, if you believe the Bible, or if you're Jewish, you believe God works in plagues. He sent a plague, and
That's too. You gotta do all three religions if you're gonna hit them all, babe, because they all
yeah,
come
fair
from
enough,
that
sure,
same.
yeah.
Okay,
Islam too is
I mean,
yeah,
right?
believes
Because they deal
also
with
that
the Old Testament somewhat.
God
Yes, they
works in
do.
plagues. You're right.
Mm-hmm. That's
So
right.
it, but it's mostly the Christians and the conservatives who
The
bel
evangelicals,
yeah,
as they
mostly
call
them,
themselves now.
who are the Trump supporters, but they don't want to believe that the pandemic was um you know divinely motivated, even though we know from the Bible that God works in plagues. And it was the perfect scenario to prove that a businessman is not a good president and that the country should not be ran like a business. It's much more like a
Well,
family. A country should be run much more like a family than it is uh,
well, that all depends, I think,
a
upon the
business, I think.
businessman, the business person.
Well, you could
Okay,
have a business person be president, but they shouldn't run the country like a business.
not totally. I mean, not absolutely like that, because you can't make a country believe it should come out on the plus side all the time if it's citizenship, if its people are suffering, then
Well,
if
it's
the
just
country
totally
doesn't make
different.
money, that's what I'm
Again,
saying.
I think it's
Right.
much more like a
Oh.
family where your
I'm
goal
sort of
isn't to make money. Your goal is to, I mean, for most parents, their goal is to raise healthy, well adjusted children who are productive members of society. Uh, I mean, it's sort of different because the government taxes the people who are the children in this, you know, metaphor. It's not, the metaphor doesn't
right.
hold up because it's not really like a family. It's much more like a family than it is a business, I think. But it's different than both. It's much more like, you know, a country. It has to be its own thing. So, yeah, anyways.
Number one that I've said before is that as one of the things that the enlightened period, as you always like to talk about,
Mhm.
as our founders were in,
Right.
was an idea that people would only be governed if they allowed it.
Mhm.
That was sort of an now partly because they had gone back and researched back into antiquity in Greece when the city states chose to be or not. Do you know what I mean? Like they would divide, they would, they could change from one sort of a government to the other. Do you know what I'm sort of saying? And that did in antiquity. Like not
Uh-huh.
all of them were democracies, and not all of them were this, not all of them were that. Some of them transformed into some and into like a monarchy, and some became a republic, and some. Do you know what I mean? So they all it was sort of a transient thing, and they realized that part of that was a great awakening in the idea that people allow themselves to be governed. Okay,
Mhm.
so when a government, which is why revolution is part of what goes along with a government. I mean that's the yin and yang of it.
Mhm.
That's how it sort of works. Now, in our case, the framer founders, and I believe it was probably mostly George Mason as the framer founder, decided that one should allow for that revolution to be done more peaceably
Mhm.
even though at that time they did not think that the common people, you and I, could actually govern ourselves, like would be aware enough to do a good vote,
Mm-hmm.
shall we say, or and in part of that, that's true, and what they're concerned about did come to be to fruition partly, which was that the citizenship would not stay engaged. In order to have a good, strong, solid democracy, the
Mm-hmm.
people within it must be active politically.
And
It, it,
educated.
it is, well, that's part of what they thought goes with, but they've known all along that propaganda was done. So that in and of itself is sort of a weird dichotomy that they had to deal with. Which is
Mm-hmm.
no matter, I mean, no matter what. Okay, let's say that you're voting for a member of parliament in 1300 in England. I mean, you're still voting. You're a white guy and you own land. Okay. But you're still voting. You're still having that, right?
Okay.
And so you must be active. So they think, well, that means that you do know. You just are somehow educated in it, right? They didn't, but they also know that there's an enormous amount of propaganda because someone, when they go to run for office, usually someone runs against them. So somebody's always saying something like, I'm better than my opponent because my opponent is this and I'm not, whatever it is. Do you know what I'm saying? Like in
Mm-hmm.
that arena? So they know that politically or to vote, it's very hard to actually get the facts
Right.
about anything political. So it whether it so that's what I'm saying. They knew that that dichotomy existed, which was propaganda could be put out, which propaganda had been being put out, before.
Sure.
Um, Propaganda had been being put out in
Uh oh. You cut out. Propaganda's been put out.
before we became a country.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was the propaganda of not states, but the areas. The land grants.
Right.
So, yeah. So I that was a dichotomy, but they hoped, they believed that if they gave the opportunity to people that had never quote actually been given before.
Uh-huh.
I don't know that I totally believe that, but that's what they felt. This voting, this Senate, the House of Representatives, the Supreme Court, the um, and the presidency
Mm-hmm.
and the cabinet, right? Because there was sort of a cabinet when they started. And I don't know if that's part of the Constitution, but cabinet positions were in the very beginning. And they saw that because lots of other forms of government have that type of thing, which is not a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
You want someone who's specializing in, but go ahead. I mean, that's more or less just about that they were hoping that we would get with the opportunity to do something new and different, this great experiment, that the citizens, the country, the people would become
Mm-hmm.
more engaged
Mm-hmm.
and that somehow righteousness would see through instead of the propaganda. That's what I mean by righteousness. That's the only thing I meant right.
Well,
Instead of it, go ahead.
you mentioned peaceful revolution, uh, and that was George Mason's uh, intent in writing Article 5. So why don't we read it real quick just to get it in the notes into the show record for the day? Do you want me to, or do you want
Okay.
to read it?
It would be better probably today if you did, since I
Okay,
can't find my little pamphlet.
right.
Things are My life is in a little bit of a raise.
No worries. Okay. Article 5. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or, on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by conventions in 3/4 thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by the Congress, provided that no amendment which may be made prior to the year 1808 shall in any manner affect the first and fourth clauses in the ninth section of the first article, and that no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. And there you have it.
The last part of that always makes me sort of think about it, which is the giving up of your Senate. Your read that one again. I the
Uh, no
the
state
suffrage,
without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate.
right? And I think that's interesting. So what if you did consent? If you just said, okay, our state isn't going to send two senators. We're done.
Yeah, it wouldn't really make sense to do that. I mean,
No,
I can't think of
except
any reason why you would want, unless you were trying to secede.
well that or if the party which is not in power that you want to be in power
Mm-hmm.
and your senator could possibly be of the opposite the party that you don't want him,
Mm-hmm.
you know, then you don't send anybody because then it changes the vote. It's got to because it's all based on numbers.
But it doesn't help your side to not to have two less people, right?
It that's what I'm saying. It might in the voting. Because if you're going to send people that will vote opposite from what you want, then if they can't vote at all, then the people who get to vote the way you want them to in another state
You're
actually
saying
have.
if like your state, say your state legislature was Republican, but the two senators were Democrats, the state legislature could say we don't want our senators voting. Is that what you're
You
saying?
could say that they could. I
Mm-hmm.
suppose that they could. Is that what that is saying? That's sort of what I'm asking you. That's part of like this last bit that they tag on at the end after the 1808 crap that makes
Yeah.
absolutely no sense either. So it's like, so
Well, I guess they
is that
just
part
thought
of the 1808? Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think they just thought that it could potentially be used as like a punishment for, if a state uh did something. I'm trying to think, like say they dammed a river, to take the water from another state, you know, that the state that was losing water could introduce a resolution, the senators from that state could introduce a resolution saying the state that dammed this river, I want their senators to be um, removed, until they get rid of it. That the founders were
I
just
know that, but you
anticipating that that would be used as a tactic, and they were trying to prevent that.
I know, but who's going to be able to actually unseat a senator except the people who seated him? And
Well, no,
and that's
the
what
rest
I'm
of the
saying.
Senate. They're saying the rest of the Senate
On the
couldn't
Senate.
can't gang up on one
I
state.
see.
Yeah,
And get rid of the senators of
yeah,
one state
yeah.
because they didn't like that one state
Right,
or how that one state was
right.
represented. Uh, that's kind of funny because I'm thinking because they probably thought that would just create like a war.
Probably, yeah. Or it would just drive that state to secede, and they
Right,
didn't
which
want that, which would
right,
be a
which in
war,
case,
which would lead to
which would
war.
be,
Yeah.
yeah, that's, yeah, I just kind of, I leap sometimes. I don't always go to the
Uh-huh.
middle. You found out.
Yep,
I just go to the end.
exactly.
So that's why I've always, I just think that that's interesting that they kind of just shoved
Yeah.
where they shoved it in. It's like I don't know. I gotta think maybe they were definitely like doing. Okay, maybe being in a room where it's really hot and there's no air, and maybe they had absinthe, the real absinthe. Maybe they were all
Absence.
getting, the drink that will make you
Oh, absinthe.
absinthe.
Yeah.
That's it.
Uh huh.
I'm sorry.
Did
I
they?
do that. I've
Sure,
done
sure,
that. I
sure.
do
Yeah.
that.
I thought you were.
Anyway,
Yeah.
say it again. Not absence like you don't want to have sex. Like say it again.
Yeah. Absinthe.
Absence.
Yeah.
Absence.
It
Okay.
sounds like
Uh,
abstinence, or it sounds like asbestos. That's what I thought you were gonna say, because you're talking about a hot room. I thought you were gonna say they were in a room with asbestos, but no, absinthe. Yeah. If they were high, if they were. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
so that may be why they were just like, gosh, where can we put that thing in about the
Hmm.
senators? Did we do that thing about the senators? Or one of them said, like, we're all sitting around going, oh, we got to make a rule about that you can't get rid of us, that nobody can gang up on a senator
Hmm.
and get rid of him or whatever, right? That's what I'm talking about or
Hmm.
whatever. So then they're going to say, oh, we're going to stick this in somewhere. Okay,
Well,
where's a good place? Do you see what I'm saying?
I mean, by putting it in Article 5, it's basically saying you can't amend this part
Sometimes you
either.
just
Like
what?
that's like the one thing you really can't even change. Like that can't be amended, right? I think everything else in the Constitution is open to amendments except that one part, right?
Well, yeah, and I think well, and that's why I'm saying it can't just be a senator. It can, or the other states. You're saying they would have to basically do an amendment to get rid of the senators of the state
But they
if
but
it's
they can't
place
because
within
of
the.
that line in Article 5,
Well,
right?
no, I know. I. I'm not disagreeing with that.
Right.
When I asked you that, that was more a question
Hmm.
about that they can't, like, if we're back in the room, in the hot room with the air shut,
Uh-huh.
drinking.
Right. But I think it's very interesting.
Something that makes us hallucinate. Okay, go ahead.
I
I'm
hadn't
just,
thought of it that way before, but that's actually the one thing that's like completely enshrined in stone that can never be changed or never be amended, right? That
oh,
everything else in the Constitution, including, in theory, including the three-fourths ratification threshold, you could pass an amendment or you could propose an amendment that would have to be ratified by three-fourths, changing that three-fourths threshold, but you couldn't pass an amendment for ratification to change the part about no state being deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate, because that part
meaning
is completely impervious to amending, right?
so that when you have to meet that threshold of the 2/3 in Congress, right? Right when in the first part of the, have I cut out on you again?
No, no, I hear you.
Oh, okay. Um, at the first part of the Article 5, right? It's about that
Proposing the amendment.
2/3
Hmm.
proposing that 2/3 of Congress. So in that case, 2/3 of Congress, they know. I mean, that must have something to do with how they also feel about the Senate.
So I think that yeah, if you had two-thirds of Congress or two-thirds of the states call for an amendment to uh
Of a state's representation of their senators.
yeah, that you'd have a constitutional crisis at that point, because that's part of the Constitution that can't be amended. Or maybe it can. I don't know. Maybe it could be. Maybe that part, since there's no date.
If you agree to it, it says if a state agrees to it, which I think is interesting, sort of, but it does say that, right? I mean, that is the linguistics of it.
Let me. I'm gonna pull
Without
it
their
back up again.
consent, without their consent.
Yeah.
I
Well,
know this one.
again, uh, I mean, you would have to really dissect it and maybe talk to some legal scholars and like historians to put it all in, the originalist context of what they were trying to say, because it says there's a semicolon after the part about ratification, as one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by the Congress, semicolon, provided that no amendment which may be made prior to the year 1808 shall in any manner affect the first and fourth clauses in the ninth section of the first article, semicolon, again, and that no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. So my interpretation of that would be that part about no state without its consent deprived of its equal suffrage, that has no relationship to the the year 1808. That part is just on its own, forever
Yes,
in perpetuity. No state shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate.
that's
So,
what I think.
mhm. So it
I mean,
says,
I agree.
if you were to reread it and just read it without that part about the part that is contingent on the year 1808. So if I were to read it, uh, let's see, okay, one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by the Congress, semicolon, uh,
No, I'm just always more without their
and
consent.
that no state, hmm,
Without their consent. So it's like if a state
provided that
consented it.
no amendment which may be made prior to the year 1808 shall in any manner affect the first,
So it is
and
always
that
an
no state
interesting
without.
to me.
Actually, I
But
want, you know what? Actually, reading it again, I think that part about
the
state
1808,
suffrage in the Senate might apply to the year 1808. And actually, after that year, maybe uh, we could make an amendment that, like, I think what it's saying is that to deprive a state of its equal suffrage in the Senate, you would have to do an amendment, and it would have to go through the three-fourths ratification. Uh, but it just wasn't possible until 1808. But anyways, I think this subject is probably super boring because it's neither here nor there. Honestly, it's not going to happen. So,
it's so weird to me more that they throw it in.
uh
Like
huh.
that's what I'm saying to
It's
you.
interesting.
It's okay. It's like that's what I'm saying. Here's a bunch of guys sitting
Mm-hmm.
around supposedly writing this document. That's what
Mm-hmm.
I hear. That's supposedly the propaganda on it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the facts on it too.
But
And
either
they would
way,
shut the windows because they
that's
didn't
the.
want anybody to hear.
I think that's a question to ask a constitutional scholar someday, or or just to keep
I
an.
think there's a lot of argument on that because it is
Mm-hmm.
also a grammatical thing, just
Yeah.
like you're saying at the time. And we don't really, I don't know, they were writing a little, they weren't doing it on a computer. So to know that semicolon, semicolon, maybe they were that precise and they would know that, but it's really,
Who knows?
I think it's just interesting. And I think it's just interesting how they write it all with that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do. I think it's interesting how they wrote it all into that in a
Yeah.
way because it was important to them.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we're going back to. If they're going to write it in this document where it supposedly is a really not a comfortable place to be
Right.
sitting and enjoying yourself or whatever, then why are you going to write in something that's superfluous or unimportant to you?
I I
So
bet you it had to do with uh
slavery and the tax
exactly slavery and
and
anything
the tax.
that would lead to a civil war. Like they probably already saw that, like, wow, the states that we're trying to unite are all sort of very different and probably don't really like each other, and at some point there probably is going to be a civil war. So we should try and like head that off. And that's why they put those all
There's
those all those parts after that semicolon to try and head that off, but eventually it was inevitable, I guess.
There has been that suggestion among historians. It's not totally and universally let you know that you have you have stumbled on one. I
Hmm.
mean, I have obviously that's one that I have thought. It's not my most favorite one.
Hmm.
Mine, of course, would be a little more less flattering to them.
Hmm.
Anyway, we'll move on
Yeah.
that.
Well,
And
here,
that
real quick, we're
okay.
already we're already getting close to our hour, but let's before we run out of time, there was one little article I found that talked about how the amendments to the Constitution have come in waves. And this is from the constitutioncenter.org, written by Michael B. Rappaport and David A. Strauss, uh, about Article 5. And it says this is a paragraph that says the amendments to the Constitution have come in waves. The first 12 amendments, including the Bill of Rights, were added by 1804. So that's 12 in, like, what is it, like 16 years, or no, not even 16 years,
Yeah, because
like
it's
7 years.
1789,
Oh yeah, 89, that's right.
1789 to 91, sort of is where they're doing that ratification of the Constitution. So even from 91 to 1806, 15 years.
Okay, so yeah, so 12 amendments right there, and added by 1804, right? So then there were no amendments for more than a half a century, period. So more than a half a
Yes.
century, nothing. Then, in the wake of the Civil War, three important amendments were added: 13th, outlawing slavery; in 1865, the 14th, mainly protecting equal civil rights; and in 1868, the 15th. So that's three in 3 years, basically. For yeah, the
Yeah, and the
15th,
ratification of that was all very interesting as we all looked up on the 13th
right,
and the states ratified it like at a speed of light.
right. Uh, okay, then in 1870,
That
oh, okay,
completely
yeah,
passed
the
on.
15th actually, the 15th was in 1870, so actually it was 5 years. It took 5 years for those three.
The
Uh,
first two, I think the first two went pretty quick. We know the first one,
mhm.
the 13th, was ratified probably the quickest
And
of
here,
almost any amendment.
and it
Right.
explains here, at that time there were questions about whether those amendments had been properly ratified by the states, because it was unclear whether the Confederate states, which had seceded from the Union, were part of the United States again. Today, though, no one doubts that those amendments are part of the Constitution. Of course. Okay, next paragraph. After the Civil War amendments, another 43 years passed until the Constitution was amended again. Then four more amendments, 16 through 19, were added between 1913 and 1920. So that would be, let's see, another 43 years passed, then four more amendments, 16, 17, 18, 19, were added in 7 years. So that was 4 in 7
But that's
years.
the prohibition. That's the prohibition and the repeal of prohibition?
No,
No.
not yet. That's
Right.
prohibition.
Okay.
Prohibition was the
But not the
18th,
repeal.
and the 19th were added uh, in 1920. Uh, then seven more amendments were adopted at pretty regular intervals between 1920 and 1971. So over that 51 years, that 51 years there were seven, and that I would say that was like the golden era for amendments, right? That was where you had the repeal of prohibition, you had the civil rights amendments in the 60s, and then uh, up until 1971. So 1920 to 1971, those were like the golden. era
Besides
for
that, if there were seven,
huh?
because there's only three on the civil rights, I think. Two.
Right.
Also, there's only three. Like there sort of is after the Civil War.
But it's just
There's
like
three after the Civil War.
things were happening, things were happening
Well, see, they would
regularly.
click as something would pop.
Uh-huh.
Yes, something would move up the chain of command as it was supposed to
Right.
until like the 60s, and then we
Well,
did do the civil rights ones, and then it just stopped.
and
Right?
then
I mean,
something,
we've
yeah,
gotten a few. I
in
mean, we got that
19
one that took 203 years.
and that's what they say. So there have been no amendments to the Constitution since 1971, except the unusual amendment is the 27th Amendment, which was proposed in 1789 and ratified by half a dozen states within a few years, but then mostly ignored until 1992, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, the 27th Amendment is the weird outlier um, because that one came in 92, 21 years after 71, which was when the end of that golden era.
It's really not.
Hmm.
It's really not an amendment of its time.
Exactly,
It isn't
yes.
a. It is an amend. It is an original amendment being ratified.
So it's just
It
if you look at
was an
the
original proposed amendment with the rest of the other 11 or 12. There should have been 13 or 14, you said. I mean, they always say there was 12, but 14 were proposed,
right,
12 were ratified
right,
in the beginning.
right.
Okay.
Uh, so if you were to look at this on like a timeline, that that 27th amendment is sort of an anomaly, and if you were to remove that one, we haven't had an amendment since 1971. So
Yeah.
that would be 50 years, right? Today.
Yeah.
What group just celebrated their 50th anniversary? I can't remember what group that was. Common Cause just celebrated 50 years, by the way. Yeah, we haven't had an amendment in.
Common cause.
Yeah,
And you don't
exactly.
think that they're paid for by the other
Coincidence? I don't know.
side.
Yeah,
Just coincidence.
pure coincidence
Yeah.
there.
I don't believe in coincidence. I don't. You know I don't.
I don't either.
You know I don't. So come on. I mean, and the fact, and what's interesting is perhaps a very cool, a very pond of sludge pond that Common Cause comes from is also sort of the Convention of States. Sorry, Convention of States. But it
Hmm.
is true that all your proposals for amendments are really just to take away rights of the people. And in my
Yeah,
opinion, what the fuck is an amendment for but to give me more rights?
I
Because
agree.
that's what I'm here to do,
Hmm.
not take my rights away.
Hmm. Either
But
give
they've always got you to do things because they tell you that I'm going to take your right away. But
right.
that would be the Second Amendment. Only the Second Amendment. They
Hmm.
take all your other fucking rights away, tell
Right.
you that I'm going to take your Second Amendment right away, and you don't give a shit. And you wonder why. If I could just have every single one of your heads explode right now, it would be okay with me. Only then I'd know you. Then I just know who you really were.
Hmm.
They could go back together after that. Okay? But
But
just for 10 seconds, okay?
anyways, my point really is that we are due, well overdue actually, for another golden era where we need there are multiple
Popping them
amendments that
off.
are
We
that
need to be
are
popping them off. We need to be
exactly.
popping them out like they are rabbits having babies.
Hmm.
Let's go. Let's get them.
Exactly. Yeah, we're 50 years we haven't had one proposed.
And once again, you blame the boomers. So I'm going to go on this one, just my little rant. Are we at our 5 minute? Are we at
Yeah,
our 5 minutes? Yeah, okay.
we're at 5 minutes.
Or whatever. Okay, so that's a new thing we're starting in our podcast, I just said we're going to Just kind of do the hope alive, keep hope alive.
with Article 5.
Keep right, and then we're going to chat
Okay.
for a
Yep.
couple more minutes
Okay.
so that we don't just leave you abruptly.
Yeah. We
Chat.
actually are already. I went on long right there, so we're actually at our hour, but we can go on a couple more minutes.
Or another 60 seconds at least.
However long. Yeah, no, I mean we're not on any
It's
strict.
all right. We aren't. We do try to kind of keep to it because we all
Mm-hmm.
have things to do, including our audience.
Yeah.
And so if you spend your time with us and follow us and subscribe to us and show your love and hope and joy for us in all those wonderful ways and want to be kind to us,
Mm-hmm.
because it's time for Americans to be kind to each other because being mean really ultimately isn't going to work. It's not as much as we want it to.
Right.
It's not. And so that's just mostly it. You can do all those things for us on Twitch, YouTube, and
I
anything
think
else.
we need to branch onto TikTok. I think I've been thinking about that. If we took some of our topics and boiled them down into like 1 minute uh little like educational things, like you know.
Really, not the one where I call them white slave instead of white.
Yeah.
You mean not when I do all my flubs? Oh, okay.
I mean that stuff's fine. But like the thing about amending the 13th Amendment, to take out
Yeah,
the exemption for prison sentences, slavery for
yeah.
prisoners, or amending
And I
for
want an amendment
cannabis,
to
or
to and I want an amendment now for the Article 5 to take out that part that we don't understand because I want to get rid of it.
uh,
And that's the only
uh,
way to do it is with an amendment.
yeah. I don't know. I personally wouldn't go for amending Article 5 just because that's so fraught with
When it's 1808, what it's so fraught. So that why not go after the heart of the beast, man? We're supposed to go down into the belly of the demon, right? So if you're going to go after anything, say, hey, man, I want to go after the Article 5. What's Common Cause going to say to you then? What's the ACLU going to say to you then? What? You want to do an amendment for the Article 5 with an Article 5? We'd have them so racing their own tails.
maybe could be an interesting strategy.
Can we put that one on TikTok?
Sure. We just need things that 3/4 of the states will agree to. You know.
Think that anything that would amend the Article 5 will probably go that far. But I can dream. A girl
Yeah.
can dream.
Sure.
And you have to have a little sense of humor
Yeah.
about that. You have to not take yourself all too seriously, even with the Article 5. And I think that George Mason would feel that way. I think he probably had a pretty good sense of humor. I think that's why I think he chose who he wanted to have his friends be.
Mhm.
I think everybody wanted to be his friend,
Mhm.
the more I know about him. I think it's very interesting about him and Washington. Him and George Washington I had read that and I wanted to bring that up, but since it's a long and I just couldn't bring that up today, but I mean, bring that up on my other device today.
Okay.
Um,
We can
but
save
I'm
that.
just saying,
That sounds interesting. Mason and Washington's friendship
well, it's,
relationship.
well, or it's that they made sort of a deal. Like they
Mm.
made a deal, a political deal, and then a year later, Mason sold Washington 100 acres of land.
Ah, interesting.
I'm just saying,
Hmm.
just letting it out there. So bribery has been part of the political. So Washington, obviously, or maybe they were just good buds by then. So when Washington said, "Do you know anybody who's selling 100 acres, George?"
Mhm. That's funny.
And they both had the same first name. Wouldn't that be really funny?
Yeah,
It'd be like hanging around with them.
that was a popular name back
Uh,
then.
well, you had to actually be sort of aristocratic to be George.
Mhm.
Like That's what I was going to tell you too. Names used to be owned like by not by the people. Like there
Mm-hmm.
were laws about in all kinds of countries, in all kinds of places. Do you know what
Mm.
I mean? Not just in Britain or not just in what we consider Western civilization. It was also in other, in the East
Mm.
as well. And so that you could not name a child a certain name if you
Mm.
were a commoner.
Mm.
You didn't. That was a royal name,
Mm-hmm.
like William and
Mm-hmm.
Henry. George is German. That's where the Georges come in from.
Jorg.
But before, yeah, Georg, because
Yep.
it's very name. I can speak. I bet you'll know this word in German. Arsehole. Do I need to translate that for you?
Is that okay? Is that
That's
really
real.
that's
That's real. I
the
saw
right
it on a. I
straight translation?
Yes, because I got this. You know me, and I will watch foreign film
Mm-hmm.
and read the subtitles.
Mm-hmm.
So I read it back, and I had it played about 5 times because it was so good when she did it. And it was the best murder mystery series I've ever seen in my life. And if they made any more, I would watch them. It was such
What is it? Give us a
delicious.
plug. Give us the plug, and then we should wrap it up because we're already over time.
It's called like 13, but it's in German, so you can't find it like in
Oh.
American when you go searching for it. What you have to do is you get it from Walter Presents.
Mm.
That's the company because they're the ones now who are taking like that's all the Amazon. That's on MS. That's on Masterpiece Theater. That's where I saw it was on PBS like Masterpiece. Most of Masterpiece now is all if you buy on Amazon, it's almost all foreign, and
Mm.
that's where I saw it. But it was great. It's a great series because it's got you. It's going.
Okay. Well, good recommendation there. All right. We should probably wrap it up because it's been a good show. Um.
We'll talk to you later.
Talk to you later.
Bye bye. Oh, and if you want a T-shirt, I forgot to pump the T-shirt or pip the T-shirt.
Yeah.
We'll do you a T-shirt.
We'll
I
make
think
you a T-shirt. A
we'll
custom.
make you a
If you get
T-shirt.
it, if you're one of the first, you'll get a custom handmade T-shirt, and I'll ship
Come
it. You
on,
just
what
gotta.
looks better than the AV?
Yeah.
Everybody will want to know.
Yeah. You can even
I
pick your
mean, come on.
colors and all that. I'll make it for you. And
And you know that they're in a relationship, that A and that V,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
by the way that they're together.
Yep.
So,
Okay. Keep hope alive.
with Article 5,
Bye.
bye.